Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming. Just going to let people come in. So, so some of you might know me. Some of you have worked with me for a long time. Um, my name is Erin Godfrey, and I've been teaching movement for 22 years now, I guess. And the work that I'm interested in is really interested in how we work with the body, and that we work with the body with ourselves as whole people. And so that is what has been my interest and has inspired me um, to have this talk. And I thought it would be great to invite Nancy. Um, Nancy and I have been teaching for several years now, and I always learn so much from working with Nancy. And I thought it would be a great time to share some of my talks with her, with all of you guys. So I'll let Nancy talk a little bit more about who she is and the work that she does.
All right. Hello, everyone. Nice to see you all. I'm a recently retired psychotherapist. I've been a psychotherapist for 35 years. And the work that I do now is consulting work for two other therapists. And all of my training has been body involved. So I started off with the dance therapy training, and then the psychotherapy trainings that I chose um, all had to do with applied mindfulness, like applying mindfulness to what's happening with the body and what movements are happening and want to happen. And, my psychotherapy training background is about the organization of experience. That includes how the body's part of how we're organizing experience. So Aaron and I are naturally buddies, this sort of thing. Yeah.
So this talk for me got inspired. Um, Nancy and I were talking a few months back, and I had written a blog post about stress and how using movement can be a tool to be able to work with and work through stress. And I think I was talking with you about that blog, and she said, I'd love to talk more about the difference between trauma, as you can see, I have a speech issue, and stress. And I thought that's a really interesting thing, because I think right now we both hear those words a lot. And I thought that that would be a great thing to explore. I'll first say that that's a huge thing to go into. And I'll just flag right now that the two of us will be doing a much longer, deeper dive into this. But I did want to, um, yeah, bring that up now and let you answer that, Nancy.
Well, since the way that you're working with people and exercise is so holistic,
Mm.
there's multiple factors that come into the experience of choosing, well, getting ourselves to exercise for starts, and choosing the exercise, and then one's approach to each and every exercise. So, you have a huge library of possibilities.
Mhm.
And so how am I going to choose? How am I going to work with all that? Because it's not you're teaching the opposite of mechanistic on these things, right? So in any given day, there's multiple factors involved as we approach the movement and then do the movement work.
Mhm.
One, of course, is my day, like where I am in my day. And my day includes that I'm in a pandemic, like however safe I feel or whatever stresses are, in the day. But also, we have a history. We have a childhood history. And our childhood history has influenced our posture, the way we walk, the way we move our bodies and live in our bodies. So there's been some kind of habituation, whether helpful or not, from our development. So that's there, that's involved as well. And then trauma is actually an overwhelming experience that we're not able to process. So when we're working with our body and, some may have a kind of phobic um, feeling about working in a certain area of their body because that area of their body or that way of moving is uncovering the habituation that protected us from being overwhelmed by that trauma over and over again. So it's just that the flavor of all these things are a little different. Like
Mm.
the flavor of trauma is that it's the re-experiencing can be overwhelming because it was overwhelming. That's what trauma is what cannot be processed. Whereas our developmental history is something that we can increase our sensitivity to and keep on approaching. Um, and our day, you know, as we're sensitive to what's going on in our body at all of these factors are there, right? So we taking a reading on the degree of hyperarousal or hypoarousal that's there, whether there's a deadening or a kind of irritation.
Do you
So
think you could just explain for people that idea of hyper arousal and hypoarousal for
mhm,
those that might not know what that is?
sure. Well, from the time we're babies, our brain is getting wired up for some sympathetic wiring and some parasympathetic wiring. So that's in our development.
Mm.
So you know how you have this little newborn that develops the capacity to smile and then to giggle, like all of that comes online. That's the wiring up by the parent of the sympathetic nervous system.
Mm.
So you have a kind of upward, you know, excitement, activation. Um, that's that's like the hyper arousal, like part of, and within the window of tolerance, it's lovely, like to be excited or to have enthusiasm. But anxiety is also hyper arousal, right?
Mm.
And with trauma, it's above the window of tolerance. So it's like off the map and it's not processable, like up there. Terror, horror, it's way off the map, right?
Mhm.
The hypoarousal is the parasympathetic. Am I saying that right?
Yeah.
Parasympathetic nervous system.
Yeah.
We have our yielding, our relaxing, but then at the extreme, when it goes down below the window of tolerance, then it's a kind of like leaving, like a numbing, a vacating, a deadening, a blunting, which is also very trauma related. Yeah. So, if people are working in the pandemic, let's say a teacher, and they're working in the pandemic and the overwhelm is going on day after day after day of having to deal with so much. They could come home at the end of the day and feel like this is too much revving I've got, how could I calm this down? Or they could come home and just like be like um, just lie down and not move. But it wouldn't be relaxing that was going on. It might be like I'm just done. I'm gone, you know? Yeah. So that's what, hyper and hypoarousal are really good ways to observe one's own experience. And what we really want is that middle ground. We want like a wide enough window of tolerance that we can have all of that going on
So
responsibly.
do you think you could explain what the window of tolerance is for people if they haven't again heard that term?
Well, it means that the level of activation is tolerable and can be
Mm.
processed and digested and worked with. Yeah. If it's outside that window of tolerance, that's quite difficult and we need to get back in. But
Yeah.
the fantastic thing is working with our physical bodies is a terrific tool for all of this. All of this. So,
Mm.
like
Do you think you could talk more about that? Like how working with the body and our bodies could help us with
yeah,
some of these things?
I can talk a little bit about it. And of
Yeah.
course, the warning is it's kind of complex.
Yeah.
Like, but as we do this kind of work the way you're teaching it, our skill for ourselves and our sensitivity to ourselves increases. So
Mhm.
that's the good news. But so let's say we're all agitated and revved up and maybe even angry, irritated, or just that kind of feeling of had it.
Yeah.
That's
Yep.
a kind of that's a kind of hyper arousal.
Yeah.
It might be great, and this is where we need to experiment with ourselves, right? It might be great to just expel some energy, like really walk it out, run it out, do some really uh, some exercise that has amplitude and force and liveliness and quickness to it.
Mhm.
That could be great. However, I've seen clients who are chronically hyper aroused
Mhm.
and chronically running, like actually running after their day's work,
Yeah.
and it never comes out of there.
Mm.
So the added thing is to watch for the signal that it's resolving.
Mhm.
So let's say I'm all agitated and I'm going to do, because I'm going to be 71 soon. So I'm not jogging, but I'm doing a brisk walking. So
Yeah.
let's say I'm all like really pissed off and charged up and all that, and I'm out there and I'm going and going and going, and just like I need to watch I'm not ruminating and just like fueling that particular fire with my brain.
Mm.
But I also want to watch for signs that the body is it's shifting out of there. So
Mm.
notice that, feel that, watch that, how my body would like to complete out of this state.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
So now at the other end of the spectrum with the hypoarousal, it's a bit of a different animal because um like going into that deadening, like with no motivation and no juice for anything, and you're just flattened out, we're going to have to offer ourselves something that is some gentle and kind mobilization of some sort.
Mm.
Um, so it's like the metaphor would be like coaxing a little animal that was frightened out of a corner or something. You just want to go easy, but you wouldn't want to just leave them there.
Mm.
So,
Mm. It's a
so,
beautiful way to explain it. Yeah.
so gentle mobilization. That might be a really great time for some of your basic exercises and
Mm.
just really be mindful of your present experience.
in
Mm.
those basics, and just it might be a bath, it might be a slow walk, just like on a day like today, the sun is out, the birds are have started to come along, like just to go out and um, I call it going for a toddle. um, and just like soothe oneself awake, if you want to say it that way.
Ah,
Soothe oneself awake, soothe oneself mobilizing.
I don't think I've ever heard that before. Soothe oneself awake.
Mhm.
I think
Yeah.
that's really helpful because I think that I see that with the work that I do is that when people are in that deadened, flat place,
Mhm.
there's usually this idea that we have to like whip the body into shape or, like get going, like in this very kind of harsh
Mhm.
way.
And then we're gonna blame ourselves for the resistance to that,
Mm,
like I didn't do it, like,
mm.
and it's more helpful and supportive to have the tools
Mm.
to, yeah. And just to complicate matters, like,
Go for it.
how we were parented is all in on this.
Yeah.
So, you know, um, was the idea of being disciplined, how benevolent was that in our upbringing? How sensitive was it? How benevolent was it?
Mm.
I noticed that my clients have the resistance to routines often had very harsh parenting that even was frightening for doing, getting going and doing things. Um, so, looking at, like, it's us that's going to look after us. So who's the us? Like, are we being like our parents again? Is that a lot of it might be really good, how we were taken care of.
Yeah.
Um, were the routines at home? Did they feel safe and nurturing, or did they feel stifling?
Mhm.
All of that. Was there unconditional positive regard, whether you succeeded or not?
Yeah.
Was that there? Was there an experimental attitude to how you're doing? Like, did that feel good? Did that work for you? Which, of course, helps a child to become have healthy autonomy, to be have a kind of interaction with parents that fosters that interest in
Mhm.
how is that working for you? Does that feel better? Do you like that? You know,
Mhm.
and like wise parents understand about state changes too. Like my favorite example recently is my grandson. One of my grandsons was absolutely refusing to go to his physical activity. He just was having too much trouble changing from where he was now to what he had to do to get ready to go and do the thing.
Yeah.
But when he got there, he was so appreciated by his teacher and his team that he came home so happy. So
Mhm.
like skillful parenting recognizes that the way I feel right now isn't necessarily telling me I don't want to exercise. I'm not going to exercise.
Mhm.
It's not. We get smart because we have that experimental attitude. We learn, oh yeah, when I feel this way, if I do that, I feel better. So,
Mhm.
you know, there's so many intricacies of reading the water of our own experience
Mm.
to, make skillful choices.
Mm.
The wonderful thing is, though, when we're in a state of body mindfulness, like mindfulness of the physical experience, we're much closer to our intuition about what's called for next.
Mm,
It's so much more available to us from that state of consciousness, the body mindfulness. Um, because we are not an object or a machine, we are organizing all the time. So
mhm,
we're learning through doing the kind of exercises you offer. How am I organizing? And is there a way that I could organize differently that feels better, that works better for me?
mm,
So we're our own little ecosystem with
mhm,
all of these factors involved at
mhm.
once.
Yeah, mm, I've been saying for with the work that I do that the body is a place, not a thing. And at
Mhm.
first, when I first began to say that years ago, you could see people kind of like really confused, like, what is she talking about? And what I observed is that so much of the way that we talk about the body is an object and
Mhm.
is a fixed thing.
Mhm.
And even when we talk about like being able to like exercise, we also talk about them as being very fixed. Like when you do this exercise, this will happen. Or
Mhm.
if you do this kind of exercise, this will happen. And what I've experienced is that how you experience the actual exercise is an interaction and is an alchemy between the exercise being offered and the person doing it in real time,
Mhm.
which means that two different people will have different experiences. The
Yeah.
same person will have different experiences of the same exercise on different days and at different points.
Yes, absolutely.
So when there's these broad ideas of this exercise will help you be calm,
Mhm.
it might, but it might not. And
Yeah.
there's so much even within the exercise movement field, even though the attempt is to feel and be in yourself, we are orienting to the exercise and to being able to execute the exercise versus what you were saying, which is I'm going to experiment with this and see how it goes
Mhm.
and see how it goes through time.
Mhm.
So that for me is a huge piece because
Mhm.
when you include this idea of state and being able to change a state,
Mhm. Mhm.
you can be doing an exercise that feels great at the time that then hurts you afterwards.
Mhm.
You can do an exercise that feels kind of terrible at the time that can be helpful
Mhm.
after.
Yeah.
So it's not often people will ask me, they ask me, what is this exercise for? As if it's an absolute.
Mhm.
And then they ask, am I doing it right?
Mhm.
As if it's an absolute.
Mhm.
And then they ask me how it should feel as an absolute. So there's a few issues inherent with how the whole industry so far, it's changing,
Mhm.
but looks at movement forms, which to me comes out of a very fixed idea of what the body is, and
Mhm.
also a fixed idea of what the body should be. As if we're asking the body to become a fixed strength, a fixed weight, a fixed state. Um, and so for me, it's about when we move the body. And even when we think about that, that we enter into that with some of the things that you're talking
Mhm.
about, which is being able to include your state, being able to include, um, being able to observe how you feel before,
Mhm.
how you feel during,
Mhm.
and how you feel after through time. And
So
the other,
sensing, really,
yeah,
like sensing before, during, and after. And I guess that leads to sensing ourselves through the day, like
yeah,
sensing that. And, there's mindfulness is like really a hugely researched and accepted idea. But you and I are really talking about applying mindfulness
hmm,
to our experience of our body. Yeah, our body's where our whole self lives, and but the cool thing is attending to the sensations, the physicality of our whole self
hmm,
is remarkably stabilizing. Like it puts us right upside our intuition, and it has very powerful tools for stabilizing what feels not so great.
hmm.
It's it's like I'm talking about how complicated it is, but the flip side is that is so simple.
Hmm.
That
So,
that's the
can you talk a bit more about, in an example, how you would do that? How you would sense your experience?
well, well, I can give myself as an example this
Mhm.
morning. Um, I am working with a vulnerability of a tension at the back of my heart. So it's in the back.
Mm,
And I want to let that go. I want to let that go and have the whole body organized without that block. So when I woke up this morning, I was aware of it. And then what felt right was gentleness, like wakefulness, but gentleness.
mm,
So I felt the intuition. I want to be outside where, because there's new birds coming all the time, and the sun was out. So I went outside for more of a toddle than a walk, and just was so easy and gentle. And I got some flow started happening. I was aware of the like relaxing my rib cage down, like letting it rest on the legs. So I was out there walking. I thought, well, this is great. I think I really want to um, access my lower body support.
mm,
I think that's really great. I'm going to be doing this webinar with Erin.
mm.
Probably would be really good to be nicely grounded. And so I came in, I set my timer on my phone so I don't have to worry about what time it is, or if I'm, because I could drop into that and just disappear for an hour and a half or something. So
Yeah.
so then I did uh like grounding work. I did basic stuff with the hips, and I did some strengthening stuff with the core,
Mm.
and I got to the point where actually I felt, I think that's enough. Even
Mm.
though the timer hadn't run out yet, I had
Ah,
that sense. That's enough.
mhm.
Okay. I had what like to call a meeting with myself.
Yeah.
And a meeting with myself, I
Yeah.
think maybe that's enough. I think it is enough.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's that. It's wonderful because it's uh it's me learning to be very kind. Like I'm looking after myself.
Mhm.
I'm having the discipline of doing the work,
Mhm.
and I'm being kind.
Mhm.
So I like that.
Yeah.
The way the
Yeah.
way we like it if people are kind to us.
Yeah.
So I like it if I'm kind to me too.
Mhm.
Newsflash, right?
Yeah.
because that isn't necessarily my history, in growing up. The feeling of kindness through the parenting. No, that's not my history in development. So this is so
I
cool, right?
I think what's so great about part of what you're sharing, there's a few things that I want to kind of underscore or highlight in that is that um, because different people will be at different spots in their like experience with being able to work with themselves in this way. So I just want to highlight that you're extremely experienced
Mm,
working with your body, but um, that and this is also something that you and I have talked about because we think about exercise or being able to put exercise in as really often trying to achieve a certain goal. And while I think it can do that, the very act of some time that you spend moving your body with your body
mhm.
over time, if you're tuning in, begins to give you these deeper tools.
Yeah.
It's the doing exercise over time or movement or with your body
Mhm,
and the tuning in over time
mhm.
that gives you more feedback.
Right.
For me, I often frame that as movement and working with the body is something to learn. We often have this idea of I'm doing it right or doing it wrong,
Mhm,
and it's something to learn, and it's to learn about ourselves. And something has happened again within the exercise in like field that there's this idea that everyone should like do the same kind of exercise, which I think is hysterical because it's like saying that two people or 100 people go out on a warm day and everybody has the same experience.
mhm,
And we know that the heat for some people is very relaxing
mhm,
and very soothing. And for other people, it's exhausting.
mhm. Yeah.
So there is this experimenting of, I was thinking about it in terms of if you're thinking about heat, if you're in out in the sun, it
Mhm.
could be feeling great and you don't observe at the time that you're being burned
Yeah. Mhm.
until afterwards and you go, "Oh, it felt great at the time, but I was in the sun too long. So next time
Right.
Right.
I might still go out, but I might bring a hat or I might have to put
Mhm,
sunscreen or I might have to get out of the shade sooner than other people."
mhm, mhm,
Right? So there's this learning that we have in every area of our life,
mhm,
and being able to move the body is the same thing. And the added aspect of it is that the body itself, as you said, is organizing. It's going to emerge, and this for me is where when we talk about stress, when we go through things and there's different things going on for us, the experiences and how the your like experience might react completely differently, you
mhm.
know, or we might need really different things. So what might have worked before for our stress might not work
Mhm.
now for our stress. But there is a value in being able to have some time for ourselves with that. Um, the other thing that I want to bring into that I've often talked about, and you explain it a bit of a different way, but I often say that when you're working with movement, you want both your thinking and your feeling operating.
Mhm.
So, what I mean by that is your thinking is, I'm going to do this thing.
Mhm.
And then you also need to see how you feel about it.
Yeah.
and that one does not knock the other out. Because I really feel like there's sort of this like wave with us moving from thinking being the all-knowing place to this big shift of the body holds all the truth.
Yeah.
And I have a different feeling about that. I don't think the body holds all the truth. I think it holds the truth and some of the garbage.
Right. Yeah.
Right? So when you tune in, this is what we were saying before about the change in state. If you tune into your state and you only go by the state, which is, I feel very flattened right now, so I'm just not going to do anything because I'm so tuning in. And that flattened state means that's the full, whole truth. But if you use your thinking as well to observe, oh, I've observed that this happens for me when this happens, and I've been able to track that, and I've observed that when I do something a bit, it actually changes. And you had a great way of describing this in your work from your lens of the top down, bottom up approach. And I think that when we're talking about the body and stress, that is really so helpful to include both our thinking experience or the top down, like I'm going to do this day, and also our feeling, being able to sense.
I think it would be great to think about the top down as like our wise adult or ideal parent, that is both observant and making the decisions. So the ideal parent is observant and sensitive, but is also making the decisions. Because because there are many decisions that little children are not qualified to make.
Right, yes.
Oh,
I'm experiencing that now with a 2-year-old, so I can, yes.
that's right. It's so funny. Yeah, exactly. So I always use the analogy of a sandbox because I like the idea that, let's say we're all in nursery school and there's a sandbox available for us to play at a certain time every day. So we just get to the sandbox. Then whatever happens in the sandbox on that day, it depends. It depends. Yeah, it might be very quiet and small. It might be a grand relation. Whatever. It's sort of an analogy I think of for artists and writers and, like who may feel stuck. Just show up. Just show up. For me, a certain time in the day and the week, that holds me. That's the sandbox. Just go to the sandbox. Then whatever I do when I get there is dependent on my observing self. So the thinking, that's part of thinking is observing and choosing.
Yeah, I think that that's very helpful because what I've noticed is sometimes this idea of tuning into the body is almost trying to get rid of the thinking. And for me, I'm really interested of how these things work in support of each other.
Yes.
And I think it's particularly important when there is trauma or high stress, when being able to feel or sense can be either all over the place or numb, or it's when being able to sense is not feeling safe or very organized.
Yeah.
there's a real interplay for me of
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
being able to zoom in and zoom out,
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
where you can go into the feeling experience and expand, and then there are times where that's not where that's not a great idea. And that was something I wanted you to talk a bit more briefly, because I know it's a very big topic.
Mhm. Mhm.
But I was talking to you about, within the work that I do, trauma is there because I work with people.
Yeah. And it's common.
And yeah,
Mhm.
so, but I don't work with people through or on it.
Mhm.
Um, I work knowing that it's there and giving tools.
Mhm.
And it was so interesting to me because when I said that, I think you said something to me like, well, I don't actually work on it either.
Mhm.
And I thought that was so helpful because I think there's a lot of misunderstandings about trauma is something to like release or get over, or
Yeah. Yeah.
that you have to like go into it for it to resolve.
Mhm.
And yeah, I was just wondering
So,
if you could
so
share.
a good trauma informed psychotherapy is going to always, like, first of all, you don't have to go toward a trauma. If there's trauma in your history, it's evidenced in your present life. That's the problem. Like, so trauma memory is being evidenced in extremes and hypoarousal in certain kind of behaviors and whatnot. So um, all of the trauma informed work is about bringing the traumatized parts of ourselves into an experience of the present as safe, into experience as the relationships are safe. So that's the way the work is done. Like any kind of processing, even, which only happens when there's a significant amount of stability and understanding of that is the past and I'm in the present. Like once the person can really know that and feel that, then even like processing is only undoing the physical holding that, and in just in little slivers, of how what needs to be completed there. Like, do we have a truncated experience that needs to be freed up, like an ability to say no, an ability to push back, for example.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So trauma informed therapy, which is more like trauma informed, is growing, thank God, through the professions, but it's not always there in psychotherapy and in psychiatry. So uh, unfortunately, it's not always there. Um, but I mean, it's just so commonplace. I feel we all need to understand about trauma. It's part of our world, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, but I thought that was so helpful, that it's not about like going into it. It's not about kind of reopening it. It's almost the opposite from what I'm hearing
Yeah.
from you, is that
Mhm.
it's really about
Mhm.
establishing experiences of feeling safe in the now.
It's about the present.
Yeah.
It's all about the
Yeah.
present and
And
understanding that all whatever trauma symptoms I have are the parts of me that needed to do that in the past.
mhm.
And so really it's not bad or wrong. It's just understandable. Yeah.
Can you briefly, I know it's again a very big topic, but briefly talk about how that can intersect with stress?
Well, if we have trauma in our history and it's not healed or resolved, it's blending with everything.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so does so do our developmental, whatever our developmental history is, it also blends with everything.
Mhm.
So to get the unblending, we become increasingly aware.
Mhm.
But again, our bodies are very strong tools for that,
Mhm.
for understanding. Yeah.
So for you, could you describe like how you see movement work being a tool for that?
Mhm. Well, if if I had the kind of trauma history where there's a lot of fear still held in my body, there's going to be a tension pattern that goes with that, and that tension pattern is going to interfere with like a healthy, natural, moving body.
Mm.
So the memory is still alive in tension pattern and movement pattern.
Mhm.
So if I do your kind of classes, that helps me to let go of the tension and the held movement patterns and bringing my body into an experience of being in the present
Mhm.
and more comfortably in the present. Yeah.
Mhm.
So it always feels good to let go of a
Mhm.
lot of excess tension. Usually,
Mhm.
if it's been there for years, there's going to be a lot of pain and,
Mhm.
you know, um,
Mhm.
so, mhm,
Well, it's been interesting for me because when I started to, learn and then create my own work, movement wise, it happened in a very organic way. It was not, um, but I was through my own experiencing, which I now have words for, this idea of top down, like bottom up. I really was seeing this real interplay
yeah,
between, um, and that for me, I'm really interested in that, both in the overall way that we are able to actually do exercise, on the day. But
mhm.
I'm also interested in that top down, like bottom up in every single actual exercise,
Yes, yes,
which
yeah,
means you're offering a cue to the body,
mhm,
and then you begin to sense how that's going.
mhm,
And
mhm,
through time, you can change it, which was, for me, a totally different way than I was trained, which is, here's the right like form,
mhm, mhm,
really try and really try and like execute that.
mhm,
And what I observed just working with myself and hundreds and, at a certain point, like thousands of people, was that the body and anatomy even itself is different for each person.
mhm, mhm,
So the
Erin?
form of the exercise is going to be different, needed for each person. And you're changing over time, like your bones are going to change, muscles are changing, hormones are changing.
mhm.
And then you add in all these other pieces which affect state, which changes the, again, how the body is organizing.
Mhm,
That there needs to be both this idea of I'm going to do something,
mhm.
but also give it a try and see how it goes, you know? Um, because what can happen is that you can find like a great form, like you start doing this like new like exercise form, and it could be great for aspects of you, like it feels great in your upper body, but your hips always hurt afterwards.
Mhm, mhm,
And people don't often realize, like, keep the parts that work and change the stuff for the hips.
mhm,
Like, who created this exercise?
mhm,
What were their aims? They were a person. It's not some like universal knowing. It came from a point in history. It
mhm.
had certain lenses. It was influenced by the culture.
Yeah.
then it's put on top of your body.
Mhm.
So there's a thing for me about part of this way of being able to work is to help have more like agency,
Yes.
to have your experiences and keep the things that work and change or let go
Mhm.
of the things that that don't, but that it's informed by your experience versus I was told this exercise should do this and it's not going well, so I'm doing it wrong. Right.
I'm wondering if we should make some time for
Yeah,
people
for
to
sure.
ask questions.
So, Erin, Marilyn had a question about can you talk more about that idea of bottom up and how that works?
Yeah. Um,
Or yeah, go ahead.
what we mean by bottom up is we're referencing the triune brain. So there's a kind of low, medium, and high. Like the neocortex has got all the complexity of thoughts and our intelligence and all that. The low brain is connected to sensation, like physical movement, sensation, the five senses. So that's sort of the bottom, the low brain part of our experience. Yeah. Um, the bodily experience. Yeah.
Yeah, and how I would work with that kind of in different ways, like whether it's trying to get into doing like exercise, you have your thinking ideas and then you have your feelings state and being able to work with that. But then I also have in the actual exercise, you have your thinking idea of the thing that you're going to try, and then you have how it feels.
Mhm.
Everywhere from this feels awesome to this hurts
Mhm.
or I don't know what I'm doing.
Mhm.
Um, and for me, there's actually an interaction between both things because, and this is a bit different, but it's included in this, is that when people are doing an exercise um, and it hurts or there's pain, there's a huge range in pain. And you can have pain even when there is no harm
Mhm. Mhm.
happening.
Yeah.
So if if we only orient to being able to sense without also thinking and being able to observe, then that experience of pain might mean that we're staying where we are, even though the pain is not a reflection of the damage to the joint,
Mhm.
but the loop of, say, for example, fear of being able to move that way.
Mhm.
Or on the other side, again, to not make things too complicated, if we have this idea that we should exercise and we should do the whole class and we should keep up with the class, and we're hurting or we're feeling inside like, I feel like this is going to really hurt me. But we go just from that thinking should place,
Mhm.
then that can also be a mismatch to the truth of our whole experience, if that makes sense.
That comes back to the quality of the wise adult making the decisions. You know,
Mm.
like how experienced are they? How sensitive are they? Observant, you know.
Mm.
Mhm. As opposed to
Hey
rigid.
Joe, is there anything else in the chat? My husband, thankfully, Joe, he's helping us with the chat. Um, can you hear me, Joe? Are you still there? Thanks.
Yeah, another question. Nancy was talking about the window of tolerance, and Marilyn was wondering, can that be widened?
Yes, yes, yes. By this, the whole thing we're talking about actually widens the window of tolerance. That relationship between the wise adult and our physical experience. That the study of coming, what brings me more and more into the window, that
Mm.
actually that widens the window.
Ah.
Yeah, what does make me feel safer? What regulates my arousal?
Mm.
Just working with that absolutely widens the window of tolerance, and that's what we want.
Yeah.
We want our window to become wider. You know how we've had times in our lives, or we know other people that have had times where they just can't take much, you know? Um, they're maybe reactive at a drop of a hat or something. It's a very narrow window of tolerance that's occurring there. Yeah.
Mm.
So, yes, it can definitely be widened. And the way we're talking is how to widen it.
Mm. Yeah, that is very helpful. Like when you were saying before about, when if there's a feeling while you're really agitated or angry, like as you do something that's more to exert, to observe, like, is this helping me feel more grounded as I'm doing it
Mhm.
or less? Like, is it just ruminating or sort of amping up that energy?
That's right.
So
Or am I
asking, like,
discharging it?
yeah.
Am I
So
actually discharging it?
like asking, like, what helps now? Like, what are the things that are helping me come more into that window of tolerance?
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's so helpful.
And we learn by practicing.
Mm.
Just learn by practicing.
Another question was back to the difference between trauma and stress. Um, the question from Leslie was, um, I guess it seemed like there might be more looking at what is stress and what's that difference, because Nancy talked about detail about trauma and what it does with the body and where it comes from, but how is that stress different?
Mm.
Okay. So, with all definitions, they don't go neatly into an absolute box. So, but nevertheless, so I'm going to talk like they are in a box, but they're not really. Um,
Okay.
so,
Mm.
stress is something we feel day to day. That that a too muchness of something, too much responsibility, too much loneliness,
Mm.
too much activity, too much noise, too much. There's a kind of too muchness that we feel stressed.
Mm.
Or maybe there's something internally we're trying to resolve and we can't, and that feels very stressful. So, stress can happen on a continuum. Like we all experience stress. There's no stress free life. That does not occur. Um,
Mm.
yeah, that's
No.
no. So, but so we're all experiencing stress, but it can be to more or a greater degree. So there can be the degree of stress that makes people have to take time off work for months or something to get their body back because they're just shocked. So there can be very extremes in stress as well, that where we need recovery, right? Trauma is an intense, overwhelming experience. So it's way more acute.
Mm.
Um, Life threat is the experience right here, right now of life threat is trauma. Like if we're all sitting here and a grizzly bear comes in that door, that is a traumatic thing because it's unexpected, it's overwhelming, and I don't know what I'm going to do, right?
Mhm.
So it's an intense experience.
Mm.
People with a trauma history will re-experience that panic again when something reminds them of when something reminds the body or the inner mind of the trauma time. So it is different. So, I think it's pretty hard on people if they really have a trauma history they're holding in their body, and people who are trying to be helpful are talking about how to mediate the stress. Well, that's not really fair because what what's going on for them in their body is more extreme and more challenging, really. Um, the first order of business is to really know, oh, I'm re-experiencing the past. Right here, right now, I'm okay. That's memory, what's just happening right now. When my heartbeat started going so fast and I started sweating. Okay, that's my memory. That's my memory. I'm okay. I'm here right now. I'll bring myself to the present. I'll pay attention to my present time. I'll feel my body in the present. Yeah. So that's the difference. Is that helpful?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm.
I think
Well,
it's kind of the way the trauma memory comes up for people is it's a whoosh, a kind of strong whoosh
mm,
of yeah.
mm, mm.
A re-experiencing of a life threat or a completely unexpected and overwhelming
Mm,
um, incidents.
mm.
Mhm.
I saw a question, I can see it in the chat, of how that relates to movement, and I'll just answer that a bit, and then I think we should probably wrap up. Um, for me, it's like layered again. It doesn't fit into, it's not easily fit into a box,
Mhm.
but movement, both for me, reveals how we feel, reveals our experience, and can also change our experience.
Mhm. Yes.
So people often don't think about that when you go to move,
Mhm.
you are opening a channel where you are receiving also what is there, as well as offering something.
Mhm.
And I guess I just want to start with, and I guess come back to that idea of that the body is a place. So all these different things are happening at the same time, even if they aren't at the forefront of
Mhm.
your experience. And that when we think about the tone in the body, um, that's influenced by these kinds of things because trauma history and stress change the tone of the body.
Mhm. Mhm.
So that might inform different kinds of what you might choose in terms of building support and being able to build an experience of feeling safe.
Mhm.
So sometimes again, this is a much deeper, deeper topic, and it's nuanced and different for different people. But if a person is feeling tense and they're holding that tenseness inside, deep inside of them, for me, I would be curious. I wouldn't go in and say, open the body, release the body. You might actually need more strength and more edges
Absolutely.
before you can actually feel safe enough to begin to relax. So part of it is just being able to include more of yourself into choosing how you move.
Yeah.
Versus I'm going to begin to do a hot yoga class because I'm feeling tense and tight all the time. So I'm just going to open, open, open. But if your history is something where to complete that is more about saying no and strength and boundaries and like edges, building some strength physically might actually begin to physically feed those parts so that they feel more safe in the now, that as they integrate, the body that is in the now has more of the tools that they didn't.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, that's right.
So that's just like a slice of one example. You could go the other way and then everything in between. But I think what I'm trying to emphasize is that they're not two different things, where I think often when people think about the body that they have that they want to like get fit is like a different body than the one that experiences trauma and stress. And what I'm saying, that's for me why the body is a place. It has history. Things are happening there. It's responsive. Yeah. Is that helpful? Okay. So I think we should wrap this talk up. Thank you so much, Nancy. I always learn more. There's so much. This is like an area that, there's a lot, but I feel like I always learn so much from talking with you. So
Thank you. I really enjoy talking with you.
yeah.
It's really nice to, I love being your student. And I love that the way you work really fits with my training background, so it gets along. It's like really supportive to people that are really working in a holistic way with themselves.
That's great.
Thank you.
So I'll just say we are going to be doing probably a month long, I think we were talking about. But we're still figuring out when that will be. So we'll let you guys know if there's anybody that's interested in that. So it would be like a series of these talks with some other things intertwined. I'll just say a short thing. My membership will be opening again in April. So you can get on the wait list if you're interested in that. And if you want to get going now, I've created a very short series. I think it's $29.95, and it's 6 short videos. And I really made that for part of what we're talking about, which is sometimes we need to move to shift our state. Sometimes we need a bit of movement and we don't need a whole big thing, or that we can't do a whole big thing, that it doesn't have to be this hour-long class. And so I've just observed in this time where people are stressed, I've been trying to create things that are more short for people. So if that's of interest for you, that's also there. So there's sort of 3 things that will be coming up if you guys want. So thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you, Joe, for setting us up and hosting and doing the chat. It's always helpful. Okay. Thanks so much, everybody. I hope you have a good day.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.